So I'm going to call the meeting to order, members. I'm going to advise those in the public gallery that they're welcome to use mobile devices as long as they are in airplane mode and all devices are muted. It's not permitted to take photographs or record any part of the meeting. Agenda item 1 is apologies. Clerk, are we aware of any apologies? I know we have one latecomer. We have Garrett Wilson attending on Zoom. Okay.
Apologies for Michelle. She'll be in later on, but she's caught up this morning.
Not a bother. Thank you very much, Thomas. Okay, members, declarations of interest. I remind you of your responsibility to declare any interest in any of the items under discussion today. Does any member have any interest to declare in relation to any of today's agenda items? Nope. Thank you, members. Chairperson's business. Item number 1. Members, last week we were briefed by officials on the draft statutory instrument, the Greenhouse Gas Emissions Trading Scheme Amendment Order. It makes technical changes to the free allocation calculations for the next allocation period from 2027, while also setting out the pathways to further reforms that are aligned with the introduction of the UK Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism in 2027. As you are aware, there will be a debate in the Assembly in due course, and as is usual, I will speak in that debate to reflect any views the committee may have. Last week, we omitted to make a formal agreement to support or otherwise the SI in that debate. Last week, we queried how the drafting errors arose. Officials apologised for the minor errors and assured us that it will not result in a delay to the debate on the 16th of February. We heard that the order will not significantly alter the financial impact on Northern Ireland business, and regarding NIE resources, officials advised that sufficient resources are in place at present to deal with the UK ETS, and it can call upon the support and knowledge of regulatory bodies in other jurisdictions as required. So, members, in light of the clarifications received last week, does the committee agree to support the SI as drafted in the debate? Are there any further comments? No. Thank you, members. Item number 2, refer you to page 6 of the pack to an invitation to the launch of the RISE programme, that's RISE, which is designed to enhance the social enterprise ecosystem across rural areas. Pardon me. Providing training and support to organisations. It will take place at 10:30 on Wednesday the 4th of February at Craigavon, Armagh, where we visited last June. So, members, have you any comment you can tend to note? Thank you, members. Item number 3, Chairperson's business. I refer you to page 9 of the pack to correspondence dated the 19th of January regarding an allegation of pollution release at the River Ridge site on Craigmore Road on the 18th of January. Members, if you will recall, we had a closed session on the 18th of September regarding complaints of odours and waste management at various sites, and have raised the issues directly with NIEA, and councils have considered when we have considered their responses in previous meetings. On the 9th of October, the committee considered the correspondence from the NIEA advising that the UK Environment Agency was conducting a review of its H4 odour management guidance. We were advised that once new guidance is published, NIEA will review it along with those of neighbouring jurisdictions to ensure that NIEA continues to use best practice. In an update from the clerk, it seems that the H4 odour management document referred to has now been withdrawn as of the 3rd of December, and the UK Environment Agency website now states to follow the guidance on odour management that comply with your environmental remit. So, members, as you know, we do not usually engage in individual queries. However, this links into our wider work on odour and waste management, and I propose to write to NIEA to encourage it to progress at pace with its own review on odour management, and now that the UK Environment Agency appear to have completed its review. Are there any further comments, or are you content to note the individual letter raised? Thank you, members. Item number 4, members, I refer to page 10 of the pack to correspondence dated the 19th of January from an individual regarding the impact of veterinary medicine supply restrictions. The individual expresses concern that the restrictions are having on animal welfare due to higher costs and reduced access to essential medicine, and urges action to alleviate the situation. Again, this links to our wider work on the veterinary medicine supply, and that is an ongoing piece of work that we will obviously be vigilant to. Have you any comments you can tend to note? No. Thank you, members. Item number 5, I refer you to page 4 of the table papers to a copy of the oral statement the Minister made on Tuesday regarding the launch of the draft Northern Ireland Nature Recovery Strategy for consultation. Members will recall that we considered the NIEA Business Plan 25-26 at our meeting on the 11th of September, noting that nature recovery is one of its 3 key priorities. Members, have you any comments you can tend to note? Thank you, members. Item number 6. I refer you to page 55 of table papers to correspondence dated the 20th of January from the Minister regarding images and video footage passed to DAERA relating to allegations concerning practices at AFBI Hillsborough site. The Minister states that DAERA was already aware of much of the material and had already considered explanations from AFBI, and that inspections by both NIEA and DAERA's veterinary service and animal health groups found that there were no major concerns to look at. In addition, an independent inspection by Red Tractor, which provides accreditation for farm standards, noted some minor issues which have since been addressed and accreditation status was maintained. Members, have you any comments? Are you content to note? We do have AFB with us next week, so if there's any queries from this matter you wish to be covered in addition to the data breach, which is a separate issue that they are coming to talk to us about, please let the clerk know as soon as possible. Clerk, just to be fair to you and the team, when would you like those by? I would imagine there will be a number of questions that will arise from members.
Just really as soon as possible, because I will have to alert
them.
the DALO that
So
there may be other issues that people.
So we'll be obviously we're meeting here
if
next Thursday. So
by the end of tomorrow would be great.
Okay, members. So on that item,
Monday.
obviously we've received the response. If you look at the letter from the minister, there's not a lot of detail in it, and it's. But it's something that a number of us have had an interest in. So if you have any queries that you want to bring to AFB's attention for the meeting next week, please relay those to the clerk by close of play tomorrow. I'd appreciate it. Okay, members. Item number 7, members. For the record, I wish to let you know that the Minister kindly held a brief informal meeting with myself and Declan on Monday on the oral statement he went on to make that day regarding the draft nature recovery strategy. A range of connected matters were discussed, including the full list of relevant policies listed in the strategy and the Minister's consideration or confirmation that the links between them all are actively being considered. In addition, we discussed chicken litter and shared environmental services. So there's another thing that I would just like to wedge in here, if it's okay at this point. Obviously, the committee have made 2 visits in and around the anaerobic digestion areas. Obviously, we were in Dundonald, and then previously to me taking chair, I think you visited the AD plant at Clandyboy. Is that right? I would just like to put it to you guys that I think that's a piece of work that I'd like to see, not as a significant inquiry, but something I'd like to get more detail on in terms of what's happening on the ground. I think I've voiced this before. I think it has a key role to play in how we deal with slurry in the near future, and obviously have a slight concern about the lack of work in the economy division, not of DAERA, but in economy in terms of the scale of resources they've put into investigating this as a viable option for energy security and that type of thing. And for me, it fits neatly with our challenge of dealing with slurry and that type of thing. Would members be open to holding a formal evidence session, bringing in a wider range of AD owners and operators to learn a bit more about what's actually happening and what the potential is for that? I mean, I think it fits in very well with our wider work on NAP, on Lough Neagh, on phosphorus and all of that. Would members be content with that? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's really helpful for today. Actually, it fits very neatly with the work that we have already been doing.
I think it shows we're proactive in the space. Yep, John?
Quick question, Chair, and I take it you'll visit that evidence gathering would look at the role of other departments and any interdepartmental work that was required. Yeah,
100%, John.
Yeah.
And I think something that's it's a good point, because we often criticise people for doing it. We need to be absolutely on the ball and doing it too. It's something that we can do. And in that guise, depending on where we go from our formal information gathering, we may seek to engage with the other committees on this as well, because that's. We can't look at the speck in our own eye or on someone else's eye and ignore the log on our own. Okay, thank you, members. Agenda item 4 then is the minutes for the meeting on the 15th of January. I refer you to the draft minutes from our meeting on the 15th of January, starting at page 14 of the pack. Have you any comments? Are you content with the minutes as drafted? And if so, I will sign them for publishing on the website. Thank you, members. Agenda item 5, matters arising. Item number 1, I refer you to page 26 of the pack for a response dated 15th of January from the Minister regarding the trans-boundary air quality assessments and shared environmental services. The response states that although each jurisdiction is responsible for its own procedure in conservation, officials are working with the Joint Nature Conservation Committee and counterparts in the UK and the Republic of Ireland to increase consistency of air quality assessment approaches. Members, in relation to difficulties regarding transboundary consultations, NIEA wrote to SES on the 11th of December to encourage it to proceed to complete its habitat regulations assessment based on the information it had available. The Minister also states that if authorities in the Republic of Ireland do not respond to consultations, the Planning Authority may proceed to make determinations taking account of the SES assessment. Have you any comments to make on that, or are you content to note? Thank you, members. Item number 2, refer you to page 27 of the pack to a response dated the 12th of January from the Department regarding an update on the DAERA planning performance. Members, you will recall on the 4th of December we considered the Department's response regarding performance planning and the backlog of 353 consultations over 28 development types, and we requested additional clarity and specifically the longest waiting time by sector. The Department has provided this information and states the oldest case listed are complex, non-statutory consultations associated with large, major-scale renewable energy schemes. The Department also states that additional resources has been allocated to address the backlog, and further resources will come from the ongoing recruitment competitions. And as many of you will know, those recruitment competitions are ridiculously long. I just can't fathom how, across the civil service, how this has been allowed to it just seems to just get slower and slower and slower. But if members have any specific issues they want to raise on that, or you're content to note, and it's obviously something we'll keep an eye on. John?
To make a comment which is also, I suppose, a gentle request. The numbers in some areas are probably not just as high as I would have expected given previous correspondence and concentration on these matters here, and it's perfectly clear that one of the sectors most affected in terms of delays is the green energy sector. Now, whilst energy isn't ours, the environment is. So could I ask that that be reflected in future correspondence if we're doing any general correspondence as a result of a committee decision, that the green energy sector also be reflected as a problematic area, and we do that in the interests of environmental improvements.
Yeah, no issues to see. Yeah, there's some standouts there. But wind farm 598 days. You know, there's some of them are just you can see as significant outliers. Okay. Yep. That's why that.
Just looking there. I think will it be possible to get a council breakdown of these figures? Could we request that?
Yep. Absolutely. Good point. About content with both those, Chair or Clerk.
Yes, that's Chair, does John want us to write back on that, or just leave it for the future, for future noting?
It's something to specific.
I'm referring, Chair, to future consideration of ours, that we take a decision to write to the Department that we, or to the agency, that we reflect the backlogs in areas of green energy as well as any agricultural matters, which are of course as valid as ever also.
Yeah, it'll be minuted anyway. Yeah, that's fine. Council by council.
We move off moderation. Can I just reverse just within moderation back to that previous matter there about the follow-up to your committee?
Which is the SEA? The air quality?
Yeah.
Yep.
Chair, from as a myself raised it, and indeed we've all raised them as well, about the challenges that farmers here, poultry farmers here in the north have with being able to export their poultry litter to the south to farmers who are crying out for it, who want it. And from my understanding of certainly the correspondence I've seen, there does seem to be a delay with the National Parks and Wildlife Service in the south of Ireland in terms of responding and giving clarity on this to the department here. Would it be possible for us as a committee to make representation as well to the National Park and Wildlife Service in the south, about this matter as well, because it is a serious issue for poultry farmers here, and also it does seem the fact that there's farmers in the south who really want this as well, and it also will help the wider issue of the pea surplus that we have here in the north as well. So because there's a pea deficit in parts of the south, so I just think it's something that we could get a bit of urgency on. It would be extremely helpful.
Yeah, no problem. Look, you okay with that? So initially, when we'd first done our first sort of piece of due diligence and investigation, it looked like there was a change in the paperwork in the Republic that the SES weren't necessarily up to speed with, and then we weren't sure if it was a problem on the SES side or whether it was in the Republic, and it looks at this point that it is perhaps something in the Republic that And I think the Minister did intimate on the meeting that we had, the informal meeting, that was something that he was very live to, but I have absolutely no objection to that. I think we should, because it is a significant barrier at the moment.
And it's one of the things could help contribute towards addressing the wider phosphates issue that we have here in the north.
Totally.
Thank you.
Are you happy enough, Clerk? Do you have enough detail on that? Okay. Thank you, members. Okay, so we are now on number 3.
Chair, sorry, just before you move on, in terms of matters arising, I just want to flag.
Is this on one of the two, because we're still on matters arising?
Are we still on? No.
Still on, so is this a different... Right.
A different, yeah.
Right, okay, so
different
I've one... I have a few more to do. I have 2 more to do, and then, is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, so the third one then, referred to page 58 of the table papers, to a response dated the 3rd of January from DEFRA's Veterinary Medicine Directorate, the VMD. We agreed to write to the Directorate following the concerns raised at the briefing from NIVA on the 27th of November regarding cost and availability of medicines. The response states that there are currently no indications of supply issues as a consequence of authorised medicines being discontinued, and that several pharmaceutical companies have committed not to raise prices at the end of the grace period. They also state that online retailers are available to supply medicines for pets offering competitive pricing. The response also states the Veterinary Medicines Internal Market Scheme and the Veterinary Medicines Health Situation Scheme will assist with the continued supply of veterinary products beyond the grace period. In addition, the new VMD-led Supply Chain Coordination Forum, where stakeholders can share intelligence and address issues, will have its first meeting this month. Obviously, that reads in slightly differently to the letter that we'd received from that we read in a minute or 2 ago, so it's something that we're going to have to keep our eyes directly on. And I suppose we could revisit our friends in the veterinary sector in regard to that to see where they are. Would it be too early, members, do you think, or should we write out to the veterinary suppliers and the veterinary advocacy bodies that have been here before to just see where they are with that? I think rather than waiting, I think we should be live on this one and try and get an up-to-date picture. Yep.
Right to the Northern Ireland.
Yeah,
There's
two.
The BDA as well.
BDA, yeah, as well. So I think there's 2. Yeah. Okay, members. One more, and then we'll move to. We'll bring Anya in. Okay, item number 4. Table papers, page 63. To correspondence dated 19th of January. The committee has been copied between the Chair of the House of Lords, Northern Ireland Scrutiny Committee, and the Minister for the Cabinet Office regarding the supply of veterinary medicines. It responds to queries raised by the Scrutiny Committee and states that there has been no significant impact on the supply chain since the end of the grace period on the 1st of January, which will be really good news if that is accurate, and we will press the test on that one in communication with our veterinary stakeholder groups. And Anya.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for letting me back in. It's just in relation to ABP's announcement that they're planning, or at least there's 338 jobs are at risk, and obviously they'll be negotiating with their workforce over the coming days. Chair, given the impact that this is going to have to the local rural community and indeed the agri-food sector, could we ask the Department to formally engage with ABP on both of those bases?
Should be, yeah, absolutely. Could be devastating for the community there. Very difficult for the sector, and happy to do that. Members content with that? Yep. Yep. Thank you. Okay, members. Item number 6 is the Dilapidation Bill, oral evidence session, Northern Ireland Local Government Association. We have NILGA and Building Control NI, I think.
Could you just take agreement to suspend for a minute till we get the witnesses in and so that
Yeah, sure. Okay. So we're just going to suspend for a minute before session. We're now in open session. And we're taking agenda item 6, which is the Dilapidation Bill, oral evidence session, Northern Ireland Local Government Association. And we have NILGA and Building Control NI. So members, both those agencies, both NILGA and Building Control NI, are going to present their evidence on the Dilapidation Bill. Members should note that Solace have nominated Building Control NI to give evidence on its behalf, as they believe that Building Control NI have the necessary expertise in this space. This will conclude our oral evidence sessions, and we plan to begin the deliberations at our meeting on the 5th of February, and those deliberations provide the opportunity for members to go through the clauses and comprehensively review the Department's evidence and any issues or concerns that have been raised so far, and ask for clarification on how the Department will address these concerns and any additional action that the Department intends to take on the back of the evidence that we have received. Members, I refer you to the pack to the citizen space responses. Those came from Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon Borough Council, starting at page 33, Belfast City Council starting at page 39, and both NILGA and Solace starting at page 45. I also refer members to their packs. There is a copy of the Dilapidation Bill, starting at page 52, the Bill's EFM starting at page 80, the Draft Statutory Guidance and Defective Premises for District Councils starting at page 92, Draft 1 of the Analysis of Citizen Space and Written Responses starting at page 142, and the RAISE Research Paper starting at page 217. So members, I now welcome the following representatives to the meeting and invite them to brief the committee, and hopefully we've got your name badges in the right spot. Okay. I believe we have Councillor Billy Webb, who's the President. We have Councillor Matt Garrett, the Vice President. We have Councillor Callan, Executive Member. And from BCNI we have Mr Tom Lavery, Chair of the BCNI, Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon. I just should have said ABC, shouldn't it? Because everybody knows what ABC is, ABC Council. And Mr Ian Harper, Building Control Manager at Belfast City Council. Thank you very much for your attendance, gentlemen. And if you would like to brief the committee, the floor is yours.
Is the mic automatic or do I need to?
Mic's automatic, yeah.
Okay. Chair and members of the committee, thank you for inviting us to provide evidence on behalf of local government regarding the proposed bill. Chair, you've already done the introductions, so just get in today. We will provide contributions from the perspective of local government on the proposed dilapidation bill's ability in its current form to support the regeneration of communities. The significant challenge of public expectation the bill will create, despite it being a discretionary power for councils, given how wide-ranging it is, the very significant potential associated resourcing and the financial implications required for councils in managing that expectation, both in enforcement, administration and associated legal costs. The adequacy of sanctions, particularly regarding those who are intent on land banking and insolvency, and the balance in the bill between the public and private interest. Now, we in local government welcome the intent of the dilapidation bill to replace the current outdated powers to tackle neglected dilapidation and dangerous buildings, since these have a significant detrimental impact on our communities. Now, the bill introduces a range of powers for councils to serve maintenance, dilapidation and dangerous structure notices. And these measures, if robustly implemented, have the potential to address both low-level and serious dilapidation, and in doing so would improve local amenity as well as support wider regeneration objectives. However, we must stress that local government continues to have questions regarding the ability of the bill as it stands to deliver its intended objectives effectively. And we've outlined these in recent consultation responses, and we welcome this opportunity for detailed engagement with the Department on the provisions of the proposed bill and what can be done to actually strengthen it before it moves forward for further consideration. So I'd like now to hand over to Councillor Matt Garrett.
Okay, so Chair, thanks very much, and thanks to the committee for inviting us in here today. I'm going to speak for a few minutes on managing public expectation around the bill and the financial resources and the capacity of it. It's fair to say that public expectation of councils to intervene and remedy dilapidation is fairly high, and whilst the bill provides a framework for councils to act, that framework is extensive and brings forward significant powers to deal with everything from overgrown gardens through to neglected sites, dilapidated buildings and dangerous structures. To avoid undermining trust, councils will need to have robust and workable comprehensive operational guidance. They will need template documentation. They will need transparent procedures from the department around all of that. Without these, it will leave the councils in the impossible situation of having to manage the provisions of the bill against varying and limited budgets. We know all councils work differently in terms of their finances. So particularly in the context of the differences, I have to add around that in terms of the rural and the urban demand. The result of this could be a wide variation in how the bill operates at a local level, causing public expectation that far outstrips what councils can realistically deliver, especially if complex legal or ownership issues arise. And if I move from there to the financial resources and the capacity issues, the bill will place significant new responsibilities on councils, including investigations, structural assessments, legal proceedings and remedial works. These activities have a substantial financial implication and resource that they will need to deal with, and the use of fixed penalty notices is provided as an option, but they would not be anywhere close to meeting the costs incurred by councils, therefore increasing pressures on our ratepayers. Additionally, criminal prosecutions won't recover the cost to councils of having the work, and councils will have to initiate costly civil action to recover these costs. At present, there is a concern regarding the current workability of the recently presented draft departmental guidance and the lack of clarity on resource allocation, not just for now but in the long term, especially given the expectation in the guidance that the powers would be administered in a proactive manner and not just complaint-led. Councils are quite rightly very concerned, given the recent experiences, that while some resources may be provided to council at the moment, that this could be withdrawn at any time. So there is a concern around all of that. Without a dedicated and substantial resourcing plan, there is a risk that the bill's objectives can't be realised, and councils may struggle to deliver outcomes across the north. It's also important to let the committee know, I think, that the figures that have been provided by the Ulster University in relation to the resource implications of the bill were determined without any specific input from local councils. So that's the issues around the resources and the public trust in it, and I'd like to pass over to Aaron for his element.
Thank you, Chair, members, for having us today. This is an important bill that affects councils right across the whole of Northern Ireland, so thank you for your time today. I'm just going to talk about a couple of issues. One is land banking, and then the secondly is the balancing of public interest with private rights. So just turn to the issue of land banking and deliberate affordance by landowners or where owners are not known. The bill introduces offences and penalties for breaches of notices and provides for charges to be placed on land. However, the experience for us from a local level tells us that some individuals and companies can exploit various routes such as insolvency or to evade remedy action and financial penalties. The bill must therefore be strengthened to ensure that the sanctions and powers within the bill meet the intent of just not improving the exterior appearance of buildings, but also addressing the very real need to bring the buildings back into a new use and a proper new lease of life. We say that because there's a big difference between an owner addressing what is minimal superficial issues, so the appearance of a building, being forced to bring the building to a state of readiness that can be used for new purposes. Furthermore, powers of sale and clear procedures for dealing with cost recovery are essential. Only with robust sanctions and effective cost recovery mechanisms can we deter those who avoid their responsibilities. There also needs to be powers by which council can take action where owners cannot be identified, provision for which is contained in some of the current legislation. And now I'd like to just move on to the balancing of public interest with private rights. Rightly, the bill seeks to address that balance between public interest in safe, attractive neighbourhoods with the rights of property owners, and the appeals process provides important safeguards for owners, but it must not create unreasonable delays in tackling urgent and necessary problems. The public interest in regeneration, health and safety must be paramount, and the bill must ensure that councils can act decisively where public neglect undermines the community well-being. Provisions for emergency action and defective premises are positive steps, but they again must be supported by clear and agreed frameworks to guide councils, and robust sanctions and effective cost recovery mechanisms that can be used as a deterrent. Thank you, Chair and members. I pass now back to Councillor Billy Webb.
Thank you. So just in finishing, I'd like to emphasise that local government does support the ambition of the Dilapidation Bill, but its success will depend on further comprehensive engagement with councils in order to strengthen some of the provisions, and it will depend on ensuring that councils have the clarity, the tools and the resources required to implement it effectively. So we therefore urge the committee to consider the following before the bill progresses further. To provide revised comprehensive departmental guidance, including operational procedures and templates which will take account of council input. To establish a dedicated, sustainable, long-term resourcing for councils. To strengthen enforcement and cost recovery mechanisms, particularly for land banking and abandoned properties. And to ensure a balanced appeals process that protects rights without impeding urgent action. And also to consider a commitment by the Department to work in detail with councils on the provisions of the bill to ensure that the bill is in the strongest position possible to meet its objectives and is financially sustainable before it progresses any further. So, Chair and members of the committee, thank you for your attention today, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillors, does Building Control Northern Ireland want to add anything at this stage, or are you content to take questions?
Content to take questions of members.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. That was really good. That genuinely was rather excellent, I thought. I have a couple of questions written down, but I'm actually going to start maybe delving into some of the issues that you raised, because they chime with some of the concerns that the committee has already indicated. And I'm not going to presume anything except to say that any of the evidence sessions that we have had with anybody with a vested interest, they all see the value and the potential of legislation, if it was good legislation, but have raised very similar concerns to what you had done. I think it was yourself, Billy, in the first instance had raised the issue of managing public expectation with regard to what's actually deliverable. And I also have had a concern from the start about a postcode lottery. I don't know if it was yourself, Aaron, or maybe yourself, that raised that different councils may take a different angle on this based on the fact that it's discretionary. Is that something that NILGA or Building Control have been invested in regard to their deliberations with the department at this stage to try and bottom out?
The very fact that it is discretionary will possibly lead to different approaches from different councils, and it would go back also to the resources that councils would have to put into this. In terms of the expectation, raising expectations in the public, know the dilapidated properties that are in their immediate vicinity or in their community, and I know we have in our council area some dilapidated buildings that the public complain about. So if the public see that we now have the ability to be able to act in relation to those, they will be expecting it. So there's probably a rush at the start asking us to deal with the problems that are in their local communities.
Okay. And one of the presentations that we had, it was pointed out, to be fair, that some of the intention behind this bill was to look at the disparate pieces of legislation, some of them are very old, about kind of bringing them into a much easier to access, simpler portfolio of powers. But you also raised a really important point, and that's about maybe reopening the conversations with the department in and around another look at the regulations and templates and stuff. Has NILGA got any ideas in that space in terms of bringing forward maybe solutions to problems that have been identified?
I don't think we've identified anything in specific terms that we could take forward, but we're very, very eager to work with the department. I'm not sure if you wish to add anything to that.
Through the consultation process, we have identified what the issues are, some of them from a legal perspective and an operation perspective, and so we do welcome the new legislation, which is, because the legislation we have is so outdated, and it brings it all, as you said, into one location. It's just making it workable. We've identified that there are anomalies and there are areas basically that will not work for councils and would actually put councils off actually trying to use the legislation, because it's just, as I said, as it currently stands, they could be corrected with consultation with the department, and that could be looked at and considered, and we're happy to do that. But I say, as it currently stands, it's not a workable piece of legislation for us.
Another interesting point was, and it's something that we've discussed at length in here is the fact that it doesn't come with any fiscal support, any resource. And interestingly, you had identified that it could be an increased ratepayer burden in terms of if the council was to exercise its discretionary power in this space. Has there been any negotiation with the department in regard to trying to identify another avenue for that fiscal piece to help empower? Or, and sorry, I'll wrap this one in too, because this is quite important because it's been raised on a number of occasions, do you think that the levels of penalty are sufficient to address and to you know, if you identify a property and the level of penalty for non-compliance, do they need to be looked at too?
I can only speak from my perspective. I think the penalties should be a bit higher. To you know, some of these, particularly wealthy landowners or buildings that are sitting dilapidated, they can afford you know the cost of a fine rather than implement the work that's actually necessary. There hasn't been quantification in terms of what this might bring into councils, but inevitably when you look at it in terms of you know, the staff time and possibly our legal department's time as well. Now we accept that bringing some of these properties back in to the rate base will help, but nonetheless there will be associated costs with applying the dilapidation bill.
Yeah, we had a very interesting session, if you want to look back, with regard to that piece about, you know, speculators who buy properties to do that. And it's a very interesting legal space as to how you would apply a different, you know, penalty on different people. It's a very interesting piece. I'm now going to start to move around the room with members because there's a lot of interest in this. So I go to the Vice Chair first of all, Declan.
Thank you for taking the time to come here today. We really appreciate your input on this, and I think all throughout this year we've realised that you guys are really important at the heart of all this here, and you know, you are the absolute major stakeholder because the implementation, the department relies on councils to implement this, and that's the bottom line. So I think I'm listening clearly what you are saying here. You do broadly support the objectives of it, but there's lots of questions to be answered around templates and guidance and all of that there. You know, from listening to you, I think at some point that the department needs to sit down and have a good round table with you to chat through all of the issues. And I think that's what's needed. You know, for you to get all around the table, thrash out all the issues and put them on the table. I think that from what I can see is would be an important development. What would you think of that?
Thank you for that. Yeah, we would welcome that very much so. Yeah.
I think, Chair, that certainly that's something that I would recommend, that given the absolute centrality of, you know, the councils to this here, that if there's any outstanding issues, it's in the department's interest to get around the table as well to thrash them out, Robbie.
Yeah. Do you want us to take that as a consideration at the end of the evidence session then, as a maybe something we would alert the department? So, Clerk, would you remind me to just return to that then at the end of the session? Okay. You happy enough?
That's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
John?
Sure, thank you. Thanks to all of you for your presentation and the input today, and also to Alison for being here as Chief Executive. I have 2 or 3 questions here. The first one's a sort of fairly straightforward question around practicalities. Is it not the case that, and I'm asking this based on my own council experience, Billy more than anybody will know about that. Is it not the case that council already has widely and regularly used access to mechanisms to determine land ownership, LPS systems, for example? I recall using these and utilising these when I was a local councillor, and I've been here for 7 or 8 years. So some of the mechanism required to pursue some of this work would already be in place, isn't that the case?
Identification, yes, through LPS, but in terms of actual work on the ground, you want to pick up on the technicality.
Yeah, we've got a particular process, and part of that process for taking action is to search for the owner, and it will be with Land Registry. And if we do come across the owner, then we can also take their enforcement action. However, there are a significant number of times we can't identify the owner, and therefore we can't serve a notice. In Belfast, under our legislation, current legislation, which is from 1800s, we do have the ability to go through a process to get a court order to allow us to undertake the work. But that's not available across all councils.
Okay, yeah, what I'm trying to do here is sort of build a picture of what's there already and any infrastructure that's in place. And look, I acknowledge totally that problems occur. I've had issues, example, where councils were trying to pursue abandoned buildings in residential areas based on health and safety and environmental governance rather than structural. And I know the challenges that are there, but the council access systems are there, and also some of the legal teams in council would already be involved in some of those processes. Isn't that true?
That's correct, yes.
So that resource is there also. Then the next question is more strategic, and I'm not deliberately playing devil's advocate here, but councils have, to varying degrees and across parties, at regular intervals since the reorganisation, asked for further powers. And the one that comes up most often is the devolution of regeneration powers to council. Is this legislation not an integral part of future regeneration work and planning for councils?
Definitely is. I mean, when you look at some of our town centres and some of the buildings and properties that are there that are hindering regeneration, this definitely would be a great assistance to that. Yeah.
Okay. And you'd agree there that this is an opportunity to move us beyond. I mean, there's good work's been done mostly around the aesthetics, shop fronts, signage, canopies, this type of thing, footway resurfacing. But this could move us beyond to the infrastructure of our town centres.
Bring buildings back into use, which is what's needed.
And that's where you're seeing the positives in this. And you did mention those. Okay, then thirdly, it is I get the discretionary powers concern. Of course you do. I want to see consistency across the piece, and I want to see delivery which matches across areas, especially where you have a boundary between two councils, and you could have a policy of rapid restoration in one place and not in another, and then the councillors in the respective areas will be getting the questions. But it is the case, isn't it, that NILGA have not always asked for enforced consistency, that difference in nuance between council has been highlighted before, and urban versus rural might be part of that. You're not actually asking for enforcement of this consistently across councils, or are you? In legislation.
I think if you were to have consistency across councils, I mean, that would be ultimately beneficial right across the piece. The reality is that there isn't the ability at the minute for them to be consistent, but when we're talking about it in the context of NILGA, not just on this bill, but any powers that have came through the review of public administration, we want to see parity right across the board in terms of where our councils are delivering, and where we have the ability to do that, we should, but they are slightly different. Financially, they're different, and all of that. That comes down to the rate base, that comes down to what they're able to bring in. And when we talk about it in terms of the financial ability of councils to have that kind of parity, it is down to the rates. I mean, 80% of the income in the councils comes from rates, and the reality is that that's different across the board. There's only 20% of that money that comes in through additional fees or services that the council are delivering, and sometimes central government funding for projects that they're delivering. And a lot of that is nearly down to the housekeeping of the councils and what they can afford and what they can pay for. So primarily staff, services, and all of that is something that is dealt with out of the rate base. If we have the ability across the councils with this legislation to bring properties back into the rate base, to give us the ability to have that parity across the board, I think that would be useful.
And generally then NILGA as a body would be content if there was a drive towards ensuring there was more consistency. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John. Good questions. And Aoife, you're next.
Yeah, so thanks a million for coming along. That's actually been so useful. and it is good to hear that you're broadly supportive. But can you outline to me the extent of the consultation that councils have had with the department in relation to the dilapidation bill?
So I can maybe just talk in so far as my own council and most certainly councils, there has been consultation. We have done consultation responses and sent them back again. I know that NILGA have been involved in consultation and discussion around it as well. So there has been discussion, there has been ongoing consultation, but I think for us in all of that, the consultations consistently across all of the councils have said, let's look at this in terms of before it goes any further, where we can make this workable. So there most certainly has been engagement, but the more engagement to get it right and get the legislation right for the councils is preferable moving forward.
Yeah.
Myself and the Chief Executive of NILGA met with the Permanent Secretary 2 weeks ago about issues, but this was one of them.
And so in terms of councils who took part in the consultation, was it all councils or is there just a certain amount?
All councils, yeah, I can add my council. I spoke to Blood Control and we responded as well along similar lines of what has been outlined today of our concerns around the bill. We welcome it, but there needs to be a bit more thought maybe put into how councils can be supported and taking it forward.
Yeah, I agree, and I just look without repeating what Declan has said, but I do think it's really important that round table discussion is had. Because, as Matt has said here, it needs to be done right. But anyway, thank you very much.
Thanks, Aoife. Daniel?
Yes, thanks very much. There's no question that this legislation is well intended and important to restore the fabric of our town centres, particularly where we have land banking and other issues where dereliction has occurred. It's worse in some councils than others. It's worse in some parts of councils than other parts of councils. And it is a particular problem. It was raised with me at a public meeting I had last night with quite a number of businesses in Strabane Town Centre. There's going to be a significant regeneration there, but on the streets there's going to be a lot of dereliction that needs to be tackled as well. So I give a bit of an update as to this piece of legislation coming on the tracks. But I have to say the department's attitude to it is a bit half-assed, if I can say that, Chair. It doesn't do the full... it doesn't do justice to what is intended in the bill, because they're basically saying we want everything to be like this, but we don't want to pay any money, and we're going to add a further burden to the ratepayer that, in my opinion, is already up in arms by the burden that has been continually placed on them. Since the amalgamation of councils, councils have been dumped on by departments. It's happened by DFA, it's happened by this particular department and others, where they want more from councils but are giving less, and I don't think that's appropriate. I would strongly, to ensure this is doable, to ensure that it's an effective piece of legislation that will actually make a tangible difference, the department need to put money where their mouths are. I don't think it's appropriate for department officials to basically say, well, they can't foresee a great cost when it comes to the implementation of this. There's quite a significant risk in this, because ultimately we don't see the consequences of legislation, Chair, until it plays out. And I believe there's quite a number of issues with this. The legal challenges, the burden on extra staffing that is required, the sheer hassle of it as well. We have to remember all politics is local. The local councils have local councillors, and there'll be pressure mounted there in terms of whatever actions are taken. And I have serious concerns in that regard. Also cost recovery, the challenges that will come about as a result of appeal will tie up officers in protracted processes. All of that has a cost. So I think if the department are serious about resolving this problem, and I think he's touched on this very, very well, and I've no doubt will in any further conversations with the department, but you really need to labour the point that whilst we're happy enough to take this on, we're only going to do so if it's funded. Because this has the potential to be quite a costly process in the long run. And there's really no incentive for councils to make this work, particularly if it's at their discretion as well. And it depends also, one building could be quite easy to restore, another could cost quite a substantial amount of money to take action on or otherwise. So I appreciate the need for the bill, but like some pieces of legislation, whilst well intended from this assembly, it's about passing the buck, and I think this is a classic example of it. And I think councils need to be quite forceful with the department in this regard. As I've said, quite a lot of responsibility has been dumped on councils with no extra resources. In fact, in real terms, councils are less funded today than they were even 10 years ago because of the funding issues. So I think you need to play hardball with this. I have big concerns about it, about how this actually is going to be an effective piece of legislation with any tangible benefits. There's certainly going to be a lack of consistency if they go down this route. So it's more of a statement. I've questioned quite a bit in relation to it, but your concerns are well made to the committee, and certainly, Chair, at whatever point we are where we're making various proposals, I've no doubt the funding element is going to be a core recommendation.
If I may respond, and just say NILGA represents all 11 councils, as you know, and we have had meetings in relation to this where there would have been councillors from right across the 11 councils, and it came across very strongly that we do welcome this bill. We see the need for it, but as I've outlined, there are issues that we would like addressed. I'm glad to hear today that there's a possibility that the department will work with NILGA to try and iron out the issues that we've raised.
But there's a core fundamental point in all of this. Like upfront costs will have to be met by councils, and then the councils will have to chase that money, which could take a very, very long time. So a huge amount of ratepayers' resources are going to be tied up in this mess. So I'm not sure that the process is entirely appropriate. There does need to be money put to this to make it effective and make it work. Otherwise, we're literally taking resources from other demands of council and putting it into this. And this is a particular issue. It's not going to be straightforward. It's not like you go into Strabane Town Centre, Omagh Town Centre, and you put a notice against all the derelict properties. There's people that have inherited these properties. There's people that you'll find difficult to trace that are good at hiding. There's land banking. There's all sorts of unique circumstances that exist. Equally, I've had examples recently where proving ownership is very difficult because of how inheritance has happened. Property handed down to the next generation and the third generation, and then when you go back looking for the deeds, they don't exist. So there's big problems in relation to that, and I think we need to realise, whilst well intended, I'm very much in support of the legislation, but it literally needs to have more meat on the bones in order for it to work.
Just to make you guys aware, we are anticipating in our forward work programme that we would be moving to a clause by clause piece of work deliberation from not next week but the week after. So we'll have some more information next week, but in terms of the piece of work that you had intimated at the start, Billy, in terms of where NILGA would be with the department, I would echo what Dennis has said, that you need to keep your foot on the gas here, because we will have to work at pace, because as you will know, there's about 14 months left of all of our mandates, and the legislation stovepipe here is pretty bunged. So just going to bring Garrett online. So Gareth is online. Gareth's going to come in next.
Thank you. And it was basically, a warm welcome, I suppose, for the bill and what it ultimately, if well polished, would mean in local areas. But I would like to ask Tom from ABC Council, and just to be clear, I had a good working relationship with Tom in my previous role, and this was an issue that had come up numerous times, but I think Tom would have useful information about a couple of specific instances where ABC Council were out to significant cost themselves dealing with a dangerous structure. And I'm just wondering, from Tom's perspective, if he could give us a wee outline of what that meant, without up-to-date legislation and without up-to-date methods of, getting back costs that the council were found that were liable for in order to deal with a dangerous structure. And also, Tom, if you could outline how that clause 7 under a dangerous structure notice, how you would see that playing out in an immediate type scenario where, there was a building at serious risk of causing an injury to a member of the public, say on a footpath or a street. If that could be done, I think that would be useful.
Yeah, Tom, thank you.
Yes, we have like all councils, we have taken on board properties that either we can't find the owner, or the owner is out of the jurisdiction and cannot be prosecuted, and we've had to absorb the cost of that. And Garrett is quite aware of some of those. Some of them are in his own jurisdiction, and some still ongoing. And it makes it very difficult for councils to. There's pure costs that they cannot recover. Just on the. I know there's a section that's been mentioned earlier, but there is a section 12 in the guidance and the legislation regarding cost recovery. However, there are there are problems with it. Coming from myself, who's actually used this legislation before, or similar legislation before, and knows what it costs whenever it goes to court, we can see clear, obvious gaps in the current legislation. For example, I mean, Garrett has mentioned using the Dangerous Structures legislation under Section 7, but for emergency works, it's in Section 10. However, if you go down that route, there are several problems for councils whenever it comes to recouping costs. One, for example, these are only purely examples, just to give the members an idea. If we go down that route, there is an appeals process. So even if it's an emergency, and I'm conscious this has been recorded, and I'm about to actually tell people how to avoid paying costs to councils. But so what an unscrupulous building owner, if we find them, could actually implement that appeal process and stop us doing any work, and that would prolong for 14 days or longer, or possibly another week, 2 weeks. If we eventually get to the point whereby the appeal doesn't hold, that could be 3-4 weeks before we have actually issued a notice. In reality, when that goes to court, the legislation currently says a number of things in cost recovery. Under Section 12.4, council may not recover the costs incurred in the fencing. So if we demolish the property, but we have a vacant site and need to secure it off, we cannot recover the costs. It clearly says it in legislation. The other problem is in Section 5 is that if it goes to court and a judge rules that we should have used Article 7, which is dangerous structures, because it wasn't that big an emergency, and the judge may well view that, well, let's wait here 4 or 5 weeks before you've done anything about it, councils cannot recover costs and can be actually sued for taking the building down. Those are the sort of stuff that we...
So the risk of further litigation isn't negated because there's an appeals process or not, because, I mean, we've got a whole legal profession here who are masters at it, to be fair. And we've also evidence, I have in my own council, of conflicting engineer reports.
Yes.
And, you know, and that's not that hard to take to a court and say, I've got a conflicting report. I mean, there's weaknesses in that. Gareth, have you anything else to bring in here? Thank you for that one.
No, that was just my main point, and I've just a few live ones that were still, you know, in my head in real terms. So that was useful from Tom. Thanks.
Right. Okay, I appreciate that, Gareth. You just froze there a little bit, but we got most of that. Thank you very much. We're going to bring in Mr. Buchanan.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for being here today. And obviously we've heard this before. Resource is the problem. Robust guidance is required, cost recovery and prosecutions and that type of thing. But do you believe that this is something should be offloaded in its entirety to council? Or should the department play a role in this as well? For example, if council identify the problems, see where the problem is, take it as far as they can, but you get an awkward situation who has to go to court, do you think the department should play a role in that, or should it be over entirely to council to do the whole job from start to finish?
So I'm quite happy. Speaking as a councillor who has every confidence in councils in terms of their ability to carry something through from start to finish. The reality is that if we're going to get this legislation and we're going to get this bill through, as we have said from the start, getting all component parts of it right to allow the councils to actually move down that road where they can take something from A to Z and resolve the issue, I think that would be beneficial. Where you will have different elements of different departments dealing with different parts of it, I foresee personally where we would potentially have the council coming to us saying, well, we've had to do this. If you look at the planning process, for instance, where the councils have planning powers, a lot of the outworkings of that will come down to consultation responses with other departments, assessments that they will carry out, and all of that takes time. But as is articulated here, if we have a building where people want to act on it, that you want to have the council to have the ability to go in from point A to point Z and get it resolved from start to finish.
Fair enough. Yeah, okay, Chair.
Enough, Thomas. Okay, and Anya?
Thank you, Chair. Look, a number of the points already have been raised, I suppose, just on from Declan's proposal earlier on around the round table. We're obviously under wee bit of pressure at the minute to get this through committee stage and obviously draft amendments. So I don't know, Chair, if, first of all, when is the committee stage finished?
The date we have is into the middle of May, so we're.
Okay.
However, we obviously always undertake to do it quicker than that.
And in terms of the roundtable between department and yourselves, we have the department in on the 5th of February. I don't know again the department's diary, but if we could get that pinned down before the 5th of February to allow the department then to come in and brief us possibly on any intended amendments that they're looking to bring forward. I suppose, look, more of a broader point, and back to what Matt said, you know, in terms of councils approaching this differently. I think councils will approach it differently. I mean, there's no point you're comparing apples and oranges if you're comparing from Annanoma District Council to Belfast City Council. Obviously, there's different financial constraints across the board there, but I think it would be useful for councils, and we discussed this last week in relation to the bill, to take a strategic look at how the bill could be implemented at a grassroots level, whether that is council, and again I'm going back to from Annanoma on this point, whether that is taking a look at all of the derelict properties within their district, strategically identifying derelict buildings that have a detrimental impact to the local amenity. And again, I know that was an issue that was raised even around the definition of what local amenity or the impact to a local amenity is in the legislation, but I'll just, I suppose, labour that point around councils taking a strategic look at how it could be implemented on a council-to-council basis. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Anya. Happy enough, gentlemen? Thank you. And Michelle.
Thank you, Chair, and I suppose it's in similar vein to others, but thank you for your presentation. I suppose I'm probably a little bit disappointed that we're hearing from you quite late in the process, given the fact that you are the implementers of this piece of legislation, and obviously the practical outworking of it is very much in your hands, and that concerns me. I think it would be useful for us maybe to have a conversation with officials reasonably quickly after this session in order to ascertain, given the ongoing discussions and engagement that you have had, whether they are considering amendments, because I don't think there's any point in this committee spending a huge amount of time maybe having the conversations with Bill Office if that's already en route to us. Whenever we talk about the issue around consistency across councils, and I absolutely get the issue in relation to finance, former councillor, so I appreciate that. I suppose there is precedent for councils to be working collaboratively on pieces of legislation, and I was wondering whether you've had those conversations about ultimately whether or not you may look at that from a regional perspective as well, rather than all councils operating independently.
Well, we worked collaboratively with the response that came from NILGA and Solus. In terms of working collaboratively in the implementation of the bill, I can't see that working with 11 councils, but it's certainly something that we could consider.
It's obviously something that you've looked at with regards to the approach on animal welfare. There are councils who work together in relation to waste. I don't know whether or not that's something that is possible or not to avoid a great disparity. And taking on my colleagues' I suppose view around maybe sort of some centralised coordination around that, or maybe perhaps sort of going back to the department.
Could I refer that to the two that will be implementing how they feel that
From the danger structures perspective, that's usually that's an urgent reaction. I'm not sure how that would work on a regional level. It's we would quite often get phone calls at 11 o'clock on a Saturday evening. It's difficult to get anybody of our own councils, never mind other councils, to react to those. But as we'd be happy to open to considering that.
All it is at this stage is a suggestion, because I would be concerned that we end up, given the fact that in principle I think we're all in agreement that there is an issue in relation to that, and I appreciate there's concerns about an expectation from the public around delivery and so on too. But I suppose I'm also worried that we end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater if we get to the point where, well, actually, we're not going to do this if we don't get the money, or we're not going to do it if we don't, and there's too many blockages then in place. So I suppose about looking about alternative means of delivery, if that's required.
Just if I could maybe make the point in terms of working collaboratively as councils. I mean, as we sit here now, under the gaze of NILGA, under the umbrella of NILGA, where we have 11 councils all working collaboratively, all working together every day of the week in terms of what we do, in terms of our ability in different councils. That's different, but there is no pushback from councillors, from us working collegiately and collaboratively, working with NILGA to try and push things on, and where we can be collaborative, we will be. So I don't think you'll find a pushback. It's the practicalities of it that maybe are what we need to delve into more.
That's fine. It was just...
If I could expand on Michelle's, because I find this quite intriguing now, actually, that already there will be a different approach by councils already. Yeah. Is there a benchmark? So rather than us looking at the department, because there's a part of work for the councils here to find the solution as well, obviously, with it being a discretionary matter at the moment and going to continue to be a discretionary matter. One of the, if we're going to fail, it will be one of the risks will be that we didn't baseline where each council is, and then what the expectation of it. I think to be fair to each council, recognising that their rate base is infinitely different, and this doesn't come with any money, so that this doesn't turn into a good school, bad school, a good council, bad council. But already at this moment, some councils will respond differently to these challenges. Is there a benchmark there in regard to that? Because we can only measure improvement if we know where we are when we start.
11 benchmarks? 11 benchmarks.
Yes. Is there a table, maybe building control would know in their discussions, because obviously you're slightly separated from the electoral side?
I suppose they give some experience from Belfast, and it's important, I suppose, the bill deals with danger, but also deals with amenity and things being seriously detrimental. So we would always be looking at some of those dangers. We'll be acting on that and taking that on board, and maybe each council area would want to do that. We ran a programme in 2012 where we looked at taking action. It was funded by the DOE at the time, and we brought in a matrix to look at the idea of what would seriously detrimental look like. So to take a strategic approach, we actually surveyed all the streets in Belfast, tried to identify all the properties where there was a detriment, and then tried to use a matrix to prioritise which ones you'd actually take action on. Because obviously in this, with the maintenance notice, which is part of the bill, there's obviously the bar is lowered significantly because it's detrimental. It's not seriously detrimental, it's detrimental. And obviously depending on resource constraints, you would want to prioritise. So I suppose if that answers the question, a matrix could be used to look and see what detrimental properties there are and how they would be tackled.
It actually opens up two further questions, if that's okay. So one is in around the definition, the agreed definition of terminology. So the terminology, for example, of detriment to local amenity needs to be interpreted exactly the same, and I'll tell you why it's important. You pointed out Belfast, probably a really good ratepayer base. This is the Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs Committee. So one of our pillars is rural affairs, and that is, I mean, this piece of legislation probably could and should have went through communities, I would suspect, given its direct link to you guys. However, it sits with us, and one of our priorities is to look at that rural impact, and one of the things that I would hate to see is that legislation comes through that suits somewhere like where I live, Lagan Valley, somewhere like Belfast, but that the rural disparity actually is neglected. And I think that actually we may need, and this is something we talk about quite often, is the rural impact assessment of this legislation. And I think that's something I would like to see rigorously sort of looked at in regard to this. I'm sure you would agree. It's not a question if you're content. Yeah. Okay, gentlemen, have you anything else that you would like to close with or finish with?
Just to finish, thank you for listening to us today, and as has been mentioned about the further cooperation, we really do look forward to that, and again to emphasise that we welcome the possibility of this bill coming through.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure we probably... Now you keep it brief this time, Daniel. I know you're to start.
Just as a question, I'm just following on from what Declan has said about the importance of that sit down with the department. Have you requested that? Has that been refused, or has there been any issues in that? Sitting down with the department officials in relation to this particular?
No, there's been no refusal or no request.
No, there's been no...
I'm sure there's been a request.
No, I think probably we know that we're moving to the next stage, where you're moving to that stage of bill where amendments potentially and all of that. So through the consultation responses coming back from councils, the recognition of some that we've outlined here, let's sit down at this stage and try and get it right in terms of those amendments and anything else that's coming forward to create good legislation, the legislation we all want to see.
Yeah, okay.
And just finally, before we do let you go, it was our understanding that councils have had sight of the draft guidance. Would that be correct? Yep. Okay. Thank you. Okay, members. Thank you very much.
Thank
you. Thank you for your time today, gentlemen. Okay, members. I'm going to ask the clerk because there were a number of matters that members brought up in regard to that last session to make sure that we've captured them in regard to any other actions. Clerk, if you would like to, because I can't read your writing.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, the end date for the committee stage is the 15th of May. That's the absolute hard stop when we have to deliver our report to the business office. We envisage commencing deliberations on the 5th of February. So the first thing that came up was recommended by a couple of members was writing potentially to the department to see if they would move forward on a round table at this stage with the councils to bottom out the concerns that have been raised today. So our members agreed that.
Yep, I'm content.
Yeah, okay. And really that's to get the bill workable for councils, as they said today. Also, potentially to write to the bill team, who will be with us on the 5th of February, but to write in the meantime to ask them what amendments are now being actively considered on the basis of the evidence that the committee has heard so far.
Chair, very quickly could I suggest, and I'm sure Janice will do this anyway, but so we have it on the record, the round table is in the context of councils being the delivery partner on this issue, and that sets them separate to other stakeholders that may have engaged. Very clear differences there.
100%, yep, good point.
Yeah, put that down, yeah. So the committee agreed that the right to bill team happen, and if that response could then be available for the deliberations on the 5th. As Michelle highlighted, that could save some time in our deliberations.
Okay, anything else, members?
Just in relation, I think it would be useful for us to have it in advance of that meeting.
Okay.
Because obviously we'll probably be having conversations outside of this, and it would be helpful to have that information.
Yeah, certainly for the pack of the start of that week.
Yeah. Okay. Should be able to do that.
Okay. And then did you mention something at the end? The rural chair mentioned rural impact of this legislation. Would you like a specific?
I think it'd be remiss of us not to. I mean that template. We could assume that it's rigorously applied, but I think the Cllr animation is here that because it's discretionary, and a lot of it will come down to the fiscal ability of any council to respond. The disparity already exists in regard to those overly rural council areas that perhaps that could be a detriment.
So that
possibly might not, but it could be.
Chair, that could be added to the letter to the bill team. So that
please.
can all be one letter.
Sorry, Chair, the issue of consistency is really important in relation to this because most of our constituencies straddle a number of councils, and sometimes it's absurd that one side of the road can have one set of policies compared to the other side of the road, and it's very difficult then to justify that whenever you're speaking to constituents. So the consistency is key.
I agree completely. Like Tom and Declan and I cover 3 council areas. There's a part of it in Mid-Ulster where Derry, Strabane, and Fermanagh. So it's 3 different approaches. It's a bit. I
was standing on top of a mountain one day and I didn't know where it was. Well, I knew roughly where it was, but I think I got both the council area and the constituency wrong when I said it. It's definitely a different world.
Like Northern Ireland's too small for the.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I totally agree. Totally agree. Okay, members.
It makes a mockery of the legislation.
Okay. Okay.
Chair, there were a number of other matters raised, but they will be brought up during deliberations and investigated further.
Okay, members, we have an additional agenda item included after the pack was issued, so it is numbered agenda item 14 and it's subsequent LCM on the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Bill. A clerk's memo can be found at page 177 of your table papers. I would seek members' agreement to take agenda item 14 now, and officials are here to brief us. Members content? Yep. Thank you. Members, I refer to the table papers. Correspondence from the Department dated 20th January providing notification of the requirement for a second legislative consent motion that starts at page 179. In your packs, a copy of the second legislative consent memorandum starts at page 184. As the clerk's memo states, on the 11th of December, following scrutiny of the initial LCM, we agreed to support the Minister in seeking the Assembly's endorsement of the LCM for the BBNJ bill, which was then supported by the Assembly on the 12th of January. As we are aware, the bill will provide the legal framework for the United Kingdom to fully implement its international obligations under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction. However, the House of Lords report states on the 12th of January, the UK Government secured agreement to a series of amendments inserting 6 new clauses into the bill. Consequently, the Department has led a revised legislative consent memorandum and a second legislative consent motion. Members, as this is a subsequent LCM from the same bill, it may be moved in accordance with Standing Order 42A, subsection 9. This does not require a subsequent LCM to be led or referred to a committee for scrutiny and reporting. However, it is good practice to do so, and it has indeed been led and referred to us. However, the same scrutiny period does not apply, and the debate is scheduled for Monday to coincide with other UK parliaments. So I'm now going to welcome the following officials to the meeting and invite them to brief the committee: Mr. Colin Armstrong, Deputy Director of Marine Fisheries Policy and Legislation, and Stephanie Bennett, Head of Marine Licensing Branch at DAERA. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair, and for the opportunity to give you an update today on these amendments. We very much appreciate your time you've already given to considering this bill, and for your support of the first legislative consent motion. And we also appreciate you giving time today ahead of the normal timeframes that are expected to give consideration to these amendments, so that the motion can be moved next week. So thank you very much for your consideration. So just to update on the current position, the bill has now completed its passage through the House of Lords, so it is in that final amending stage, and subject to these amendments now being agreed, it's expected that it could receive royal assent the first week in February, so it really is moving quite rapidly and at pace. These amendments, and just a little bit of a background as to why they've come at this very late stage, they've come as a result of discussions between the UK Government and the Scottish Government around the devolution arrangements and making sure that they're not impinging on what was the responsibilities of Scottish ministers on devolved areas. And then, as a result of that agreement that was secured between Scottish ministers and the UK Government, and to respect the devolution arrangement for Northern Ireland, they've also been offered to Northern Ireland at the same time. So just then to go in a little bit to the nature of what those amendments are. So the first consent motion agreed the powers that the Secretary of State would have, and those at that time were clauses 9 and 11. So clause 9 has now become, or clause 11 has now become clause 14, and that's what gave the Secretary of State powers to make regulations on things that affected devolved matters. There have now been the 6 new clauses that have come in, and what they've done is then given this concurrent powers that whenever the Secretary of State is potentially making a regulation, there is concurrent powers available to Scottish ministers or to DAERA to make regulations that are needed to implement any of the decisions that are made at the Conference of Parties. There also then is a duty that whenever the Secretary of State is making any of those regulations, that it must at least consult with either Scottish ministers or DAERA before making any such regulation. And then the 2 clauses, clause 11 and 17, they set out the procedure that must be followed for any regulation that is made in the Northern Ireland Assembly, and those procedures range depending on what the nature of the regulations are, from affirmative through to draft affirmative and to negative resolution, depending on what is in those regulations. So then just turning to a little bit the effect of those. Looking again back at the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Agreement, that is an international treaty, and therefore that is an accepted matter and the responsibility of the UK Government. However, as outlined in the first legislative consent motion, recognised that it may affect devolved matters, and therefore consent was obtained. But now what will happen is that if the Secretary of State is making any of those regulations, it'll be required to consult with DAERA, and there's now a choice. A choice can be to provide either a consultation response to make sure the views of Northern Ireland are taken into consideration, which is really a strengthening of that Secretary of State power to make sure views from here are taken into consideration when developing it, or there could then be a decision taken that no, DAERA could make the regulation and be brought through the Assembly here and have the scrutiny. So either way, it really strengthens the role and the scrutiny that the Assembly can have on any regulation that is made around the agreement. So I hope that sort of outlines really what the nature of why these amendments have come at this late stage, the nature of them, what the effect is, and I hope we can sort of assist you in any questions that you might have that will help you as you consider these amendments.
Thank you very much. The timing of this is unusual with President Trump's manoeuvres around Greenland. I'm sure it's got nothing to do with it, obviously. In these, but in seriousness, what do you assess to be the main benefits in terms of the changes? Obviously, it's been driven from Scotland in terms of respecting their devolved settlement, but we have our own here. So, are there any benefits in regard to anticipated benefits that we see?
I think as regards Northern Ireland, the benefits of this new amendment is very low. It is of interest more with Scotland, which is why they raised it during their initial discussions. Scotland adjoins onto areas of beyond national jurisdiction. Their marine area goes out and therefore adjoins onto the high seas, and therefore they also have much more activities, a much larger marine area. The Northern Ireland marine area is enclosed. It's within other parts of the UK marine area, within the marine area of Ireland, and we're not in that same nature. So the implications of any decision is really only that there could be a person from Northern Ireland, for example, one of the universities, participating in a research project on the high seas, and they'll be required to comply with this law. So it's the likelihood of probably using this option is going to be very, very low. But I think it is very helpful that at least now the consultation duty has been in place there, and then also that there's the choice that whatever happens in the future, the framework is there to make a regulation. So, but probably very low, and expected to be very low, but it now gives that option.
Okay, members, any further questions for the officials? Okay. Not a problem. Thank you very much indeed. That was a short one for you today. Thank you very much. Any questions to put on? Any questions to put on?
We're flying today.
Yeah, we'll go as quick, do you think, another? Can you see?
Members, to close that one out, members, are you content? Obviously, that was an additional presentation. The department didn't have to do that, but there is an amendment to the LCM which we have already supported. Are members content that that is the same position that we have? Yes. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that for the record. Okay, agenda item 7, the oral. We have an oral briefing, and it's. Okay, yeah, no bother. So it is an oral briefing on the US trade tariffs, key changes, and initial considerations for Northern Ireland. But before we take that briefing, members, I'm going to suggest we take a 5-minute comfort break, and then we will move into our closed session at that point. Thank you. Okay, thank you. That's us back in open session. Then we're going to move to agenda item 7 as previously stated, and that's the oral briefing from RAISE on the US trade tariffs, key changes and initial considerations for Northern Ireland. Members, you will recall that we have previously discussed the imposition of reciprocal tariffs announced by the United States of America. As part of our consideration of the matter, we requested a briefing paper from RAISE to outline the proposed and actual key changes to US trade tariff policy since January 2025 and the potential impact of these tariffs on our agriculture industry in particular. So members, I refer you to the pack and the following RAISE briefing papers. US trade tariff key changes and initial considerations for Northern Ireland supplementary dated January 2026, starting on page 277, and the US trade tariffs key changes and initial considerations for Northern Ireland dated June 2025, starting on page 293. So I now welcome Aidan Stennett from RAISE to the meeting and invite you, Aidan, to brief the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, members. As you said, Chair, I'm here to talk to you about changes to the US tariff regime, and the presentation will draw on 2 papers, one of which you've considered previously. Taken together, the 2 papers provide a timeline of key events in US tariff policy from January 2025 to December 2025. There's two tables that outline this timeline, and taken together, they demonstrate the unpredictability and uncertainty of the past 12 months. From a Northern Ireland perspective, there are two key events which are particularly significant. The first is the US-UK trade deal, known as the Economic Partnership Deal, which was agreed in principle in May 2025. Under the EPD, the US agreed to a 10% reciprocal tariff on most United Kingdom goods, a 10% tariff on UK cars up to 100,000 cars per year, and the removal of tariffs on UK aerospace goods. The United Kingdom agreed to the removal of tariff on US beef up to 13,000 tonnes per year. Subsequently, in December, 1st December, the US agreed to a 0% tariff on UK farmer products. So the second key event was the US-EU agreement in June 2025, and this led to a 15% tariff on most EU goods entering the US. The EU, for its part, agreed to removing tariffs on most US industrial goods and preferential access to certain US agricultural and seafood products. I'll come back to the differences between the two deals and the potential implications for Northern Ireland in just a moment. But before I do, it's useful to provide some context by looking at Northern Ireland's trade with the US. So if we go back to the June briefing, this provided a snapshot of which Northern Ireland sectors were particularly exposed to US tariff changes. And so it included an analysis of standard international trade classification sectors, as well as a combined agri-food sector. This includes the food, feed and drink sector, as well as what's known as machinery for specialised purchases. Special machinery for particular industries. So the analysis found that the chemicals and related products sector was the largest, exported the largest proportion of goods to the US in 2024. 32.5% of US exports were attributable to this sector. In comparison, the combined agri-food sector was responsible for 11.6% of US exports. And there's a table chart on, I think, page 300 of your packs, which provides more detail, although that might have moved about since I last looked at your packs, apologies. More recent data shows that the US was Northern Ireland's second largest export destination in the year leading up to Q3 2025. But the data also shows that exports to the US fell by 0.53 billion compared to the previous year. That's up the 12 months up to Q3 2024. In the same period, overall exports fell from about 1% or 10.9 billion in the same period. From an import perspective, machinery and transport equipment was the largest sector, responsible for 14.9% of US sectoral imports. Agri-food imports accounted for 1.6% of total imports in the same year. That's 2024 again. More recent data shows that the US was the third largest market for Northern Ireland imports in the 12 months up to Q3 2025. And imports from the US increased by 86.5 million compared to the same point in the previous year. Overall imports also increased. So looking again at the US-EU and the US-UK deals, from an export perspective, Northern Ireland is subject to the terms of the UK-US deal when exporting to the United States. This introduced a 10% reciprocal tariff on UK goods when they enter the US. In practical terms, the United Kingdom goods are subject to the sum of the 10% tariff and an already existing most favoured nation tariff. By comparison, EU goods going to the US are subject to the higher of the most favoured nation or the 15% reciprocal tariff. So what this means is that Northern Ireland goods could potentially be more competitive when they enter the US than some EU products, but this will vary by sector. So table 2 in your packs, that's in the most recent paper, sets out a worked example. So as can be seen from the table, UK milk and cream products are subject to the most favoured nation tariff of 17.5% plus a reciprocal tariff of 10%, bringing the total tariff to 27.5%. EU milk and cream products pay the 17.5 most favoured nation tariff only because that's above 15%. On the other hand, chemical products from the UK are subject to a 3.7% most favoured nation tariff plus a 10% tariff, bringing the total tariff to 13.7%. EU chemical products will be subject to a 15% tariff because the most favoured nation tariff of 3.7% is below the 15%. So it's quite complicated system and it varies product by product. From a Northern Ireland perspective, a comprehensive sectoral analysis could provide a more nuanced understanding of the net effect of US tariff on Northern Ireland's exporters. Looking at imports, a key finding of both papers is that under the Windsor framework, the tariff paid on imports from the US will depend upon the final destination of those goods. In simplified terms, US products deemed at risk of entering the single market will pay the EU tariff, which is to be 0% for most industrial products under the EU-US agreement. Goods not at risk of entering the single market will pay the United Kingdom tariff. A new development under the US-EU deal was that the EU agreed preferential market access for certain US agricultural and seafood products. So the EU argues that the products earmarked for preferential access are non-sensitive and are products that it's in the EU's interest to import. The EU has stated that the agreement is an opportunity for them to increase exports into the EU. So from a Northern Ireland perspective, the agreement is likely to lead to a greater penetration of US agricultural goods on the EU market. And a further consideration, therefore, is what impact this might have on Northern Ireland businesses currently selling such products into the EU. So looking forward, I concluded the paper by noting that neither the UK-US or the EU-US agreements were finalised, and pointing out that the US tariff policy was subject to continued litigation in US courts. So the paper states that the tariff policy is a highly complex, dynamic and evolving area, and I think events over the last week have demonstrated that. Since submitting this paper to the committee, the US has threatened an additional 10% tariffs on 8 European states, including the UK. To which the EU Parliament responded yesterday that it was putting the deal on hold, or the implementation of their deal on hold. Subsequently this morning, the US seems to have withdrawn that threat of tariffs. So the situation is volatile. It's uncertain how this will play out, whether previous agreements will be implemented. As such, the conclusions of these papers are subject to change as events changed. Hopefully that's helpful for the committee. I'm happy to take any questions and try to answer them. Thank you.
Yeah, you touched on the point that I suppose I wanted to make at the start, is that even this week, obviously, with the threat of by the President to engage more significant tariffs on the basis of any of his negotiations, it's not maybe captured in the paper, and I hope it's not unfair to ask you, but does the instability of the tariffs and the failure to know if they're going to be implemented for a long time they will affect the markets, but will they affect industry specifically, do you think, in terms of from a confidence perspective? Because part of the table you did reflect that exports were down by $500 million, I think, in one quarter.
No, it's not in one quarter. That's
one calendar. Sorry,
it's in the 12 months.
12 months, okay.
To leave that quarter.
£500 million. So it occurred to me that even the nervousness and that lack of clarity around tariffs could have an impact.
It could. I think businesses like certainty.
Yeah.
And uncertainty isn't good for planning. So yes.
And do you assess that the Department of Economy and DAERA are live to that, do you think, in terms of trying to engage with the stakeholders affected?
I think that's a question better addressed to those departments. However, the Minister for Economy was in front of the Economy Committee yesterday and had to leave it because I believe she was going to a meeting of the Economy's tariff group. So I think there's work being done, but the specifics of that work, it would be probably best addressed to the departments themselves.
And just final one for me, do you, in your assessment and review, do you think the Department of Economy, particularly DAERA, in terms of managing the green and red lanes, and in terms of the import and export, have a clear picture of whether the thresholds are being breached, or a fiscal figure for what the import and export situation is at the moment?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
And one of the scrutiny points I raised in the paper was around that, and suggesting that the committee may wish to ask the departments for that.
Yeah, just in terms of the wrap up, do you mind if we pose a question like that? Okay. Thank you so much. Declan?
Thank you, Aidan, for your report. Very helpful and comprehensive. See, in your opinion, and certainly from your analysis, see the US-EU tariff agreement that'll open the EU market up to more like US agricultural products. Will that have any detrimental impact to farmers here who are also competing in the EU market?
It's possible, but I guess those our products enter the EU single market without any tariffs to them. US products will enter the single market without any tariffs to them up to a certain quota. So I'm trying to think this through in my head. So I guess they're entering the market on relatively similar terms. So it's whether those US products can be produced at less cost. That would make them more desirable. But it's very early stages. None of this has been implemented. So it's difficult to sort of speculate on what the actual impact would be. But I think the point of the paper was to raise that's a potential impact that the committee may wish to track and keep an eye on.
Do you see in your report, you said that exports from here fell by 0.53 billion in the year 2025. What would have accounted for that?
It's difficult to see from the data itself. Given the big change has been tariffs, that's likely to be some element of it. But there's other things that could be at play there too. That I'd have to take that back and consider it a bit further to get to the bottom of it.
Thank you, Aidan. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions, members? Just a final one for me. Do you have any analysis on the complexity then for Northern Ireland importers and exporters, given we have the Windsor framework, there's the Mercosur deal floating over here, working out what applies, what doesn't apply, and then the US trade tariffs obviously opened up another avenue of Northern Ireland specific circumstances. Does it look like opportunities, or does it look more complex?
I think it's difficult for me to answer. I think the best people to answer that would be people who are on the ground dealing with this. But what I can say is that, in general, the world of trade has become more complex over the last 12 months, and for Northern Ireland over a longer period. Where there's it's difficult to say if there's an opportunity or a detriment. I think there will be both, depending on the sector.
Yes, because it is complex, because we still, as you said, in reference to Declan's question there, unless we have a full understanding and a benchmark of the product by product, import, export, and that real-time data, then it's hard to necessarily predict it. But I think the £500 million decrease in the year, which is unprecedented, would indicate that the difficulties potentially outweigh the the opportunities possibly, but it's not obviously scientific.
Yeah,
It's just,
and there could also be an adjustment period for businesses where they're getting used to things, and that could drive down a short term. So I think it's longer term data will also obviously be more helpful to see if there's a trend.
no, thank you, and thank you. Some of those tables are really useful actually, in terms, because you have done some of the product by product basis there in terms of quotas. So thank you so much, and I don't think any members have any more questions. Thank you very much, Aidan. All right. Okay, members, there are a couple of points there that the clerk hopefully has captured. If you could just read them in for us, and if we can agree them.
Chair, I picked up letters to Department for Economy and to DAERA really to try and assess if they have a clear picture of the import-export picture based on the current status of the US tariffs.
Yep.
Is that correct?
I think so, yep. Yep.
There was a mention of potentially raise looking further at that 0.5 billion, but I'm not sure if that was answered later, because longer term data might be needed.
Yeah, I think the question was that Aidan tried to tease out was that a product? You know, do we fully understand what the loss was? And I think Aidan's point was that data, he doesn't understand that data, and that question might be better directed to either DAERA and the Department of Economy, I suppose.
Okay. Yeah, we can.
Is that fair?
So that can be added to letters.
It's quite a drop.
It's a significant drop to 500 million. Like
that's fine.
Okay. Members content? Yep. As content as you can be. Thank you very much. Okay, members, we're on time. So agenda item 8 is the SL1, the Sheep Carcass Classification Price Reporting Regulations, Northern Ireland 2026. This is our first SL1 to be subject to the new process that was introduced in the Assembly on the 5th of January. As discussed previously, the new process aims to strengthen committee scrutiny of delegated legislation. Departments have been fully briefed on the changes and provided with guidance. Departments will now provide information about proposed statutory rules in a more detailed SL1 template. Departments must now also provide drafts of the proposed statutory rule and explanatory memorandum with the SL1 paper. Committees will now call for views on the proposed SR through a standard citizen space online survey. It is not intended to be a consultation, but a short 3-question survey, and those questions are as follows. Is the information provided by the Department in relation to the proposed statutory rule accurate? Is the information provided by the Department in relation to the proposed statutory rule complete? And do you foresee any unintended or unanticipated consequences of implementing this statutory rule? Committees will now not formally consider the SL1 until at least 4 weeks after it is submitted by the Department, unless there are exceptional circumstances. And that's going. It'll be interesting to see how smoothly this happens with the departments, because obviously there is a culture at the moment that now needs to be challenged. Today the committee is asked to agree the following general matters that will then apply to all SL1s as they come forward. Members, do you agree to issue a call for views for each SL1 that comes before us using the standard survey, and to publish the SL1, the draft SR and any relevant documents from the department on the committee website? Members agree. Thank you. Members, do you agree that the committee's team seek information from the department where necessary on any matters raised during each SL1 stage, including the survey? All information provided by the department will be provided to the committee to inform its decision making on the proposal? Yep. And members, do you agree to publish any responses received to the committee survey for each SL1 after the committee has considered them? Members agree. Thank you very much.
Chair, obviously with those general agreements, if at any time the committee wishes not to publish something or not to, we can return to it.
No problem. Yeah, good point. We will now move to the first SL1, members, that will be considered using the new process, which is the Sheep Carcass Classification Price Report and Regulations, Northern Ireland 2026. The Department intends to make this SR under the draft affirmative procedure to introduce mandatory sheep carcass classification and price reporting in Northern Ireland. The SR will make classification of sheep carcasses aged less than 12 months and price reporting of the same mandatory in Northern Ireland for all slaughterhouses which slaughter at least 1,000 sheep per week as a rolling annual average. Members, I refer you to the pack for the memo outlining brief details of the SR and details of the next steps to be agreed, and those are at page 312. The SL1 letter starts at page 314. The draft SR and explanatory memorandum start at page 322, and the equality screening document, the rule needs impact assessment, and the regulatory impact assessment can be found starting at page 349. Members, you will not be asked to decide about the policy merit of this proposed statutory rule today. Officials are scheduled to brief the committee on the SR on the 26th of February. We will simply note that we have received the SL1 and that our minimum 4-week process has commenced before we agree or otherwise the SL1. So I ask you to note receipt of the SL1, the proposed SR, and that these will be published as part of our call for views. Members, are you agreed?
Yep.
Thank you. I ask you to agree to consider the policy detail of the SL1 at the meeting on the 26th of February, when we will be briefed by officials after we have conducted and analysed responses to our citizens' space survey. Are you agreed, members? Yep. And are you content that a briefing from officials is therefore not necessary at this stage? We will see them on the 26th. Okay. Okay, members. Agenda item 9 then is the departmental written briefing, consultation and rethinking our resources, the Northern Ireland Resources and Waste Management Strategy. I refer you to page 414 of the pack, the written briefing outlining the rationale for the draft strategy. The consultation launched on the 15th of January and will run for 12 weeks. A copy of the draft strategy and consultation questions start at page 419 of your packs. The waste management plan for Northern Ireland was then published in 2019 but did not provide the strategic waste management direction required to introduce new policy measures. The draft strategy builds on the 2019 plan and it aims to transition Northern Ireland away from the linear model of take, make, use and dispose towards a low-carbon circular approach of reduce, reuse, repair and recycle, with landfill being the method of last resort. The strategy sets out 10 targets and 63 supporting actions in 4 parts. Number 1, the need for change, outlines the visions, targets and objectives and identifying the need for change. Number 2, enabling change and empowering action, details actions for 7 significant waste categories to drive that change. Number 3, making it happen, details the necessary conditions for effective resource management. And number 4, monitoring progress, explains how success will be measured and reported. Once the consultation is complete, the results will be analysed to inform the final version of the strategy. So members, have you any comments? Are you content to note at this stage?
I assume we'll get an update post-consultation and perhaps seek to discuss with the department.
Get maybe details for that, even for next week. Just get the dates for you, John, too, just to we have that marked in the forward work programme. Yep.
Just in relation to that, would it be possible for them to brief us during the consultation process?
I'm open to that.
Only just to, it might be useful just to tease out if there are any issues, even from the committee perspective, with regards to the approach. But at least that could then be
on the consultation,
part of the consultation.
I think that's fair enough. I think that's a good point actually, because it's a good change, but it's a significant sea change for the general public out there too. So it's now bringing a bit of, I suppose, teeth to what was initially a good policy.
Could bring another conversation entirely about consistency across councils.
Councils, yeah, absolutely. Well, unfortunately, there's been some recent news locally about some of the because there's obviously the resilience and the performance to also back up what needs to happen. That's the other edge. It's like a two-edged sword, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, it's very timely actually. I suppose we're reading that in. Members content?
Talk about nappies too, John.
100%. I agree.
Yep. Okay, members, agenda item 10. You look at correspondence. I refer you to page 574 of the pack. The correspondence dated the 14th of January. The committee has been copied into between the House of Lords, Northern Ireland Scrutiny Committee and DAERA regarding the marking of retail goods regulations 2025. Do you want to bring that to your attention? Are there any comments you can tend to note? Okay, thank you, members. I refer to page 577 of the Clerk to the Clerk's memo dated 15th of January from the Clerk to the Committee for Finance regarding scrutiny of the draft multi-year budget 26, 29, 30. The Committee for Finance has requested we provide our view on DAERA's 2026, 29 to 30 budget prior to debate on the draft 26, 29, 30 budget, which will take place before Easter recess. In addition, they also request it is informed of any issues that we wish to raise about DAERA's 25-26 budget position and management, and they want that by the 27th of February, members. But as we agreed last week, we have requested that the Finance Director, Roger Downey, brief the committee on the budget exercise as soon as possible as part of our scrutiny and await confirmation of the date that he will attend. I think that's really, really important, especially when we're looking into the potential of multi-year budgets, but also to bottom out and baseline our, whether we're content with the 25-26 allocations and positions. Shouldn't we say allocations? We're never content with allocations, are we? Members, I refer you to page 579 of the pack to Clerk's memo. Oh, sorry, you content to note that in terms of the finance piece? Thank you, members. Page 579 of the pack to Clerk's memo dated the 16th of January from the Clerk to the Committee for the Economy regarding indexation issues. That committee considered a response from the Department for the Economy regarding a query raised on that issue and a UK government consultation on changes to related indexation and agreed to forward it for our information. This is in response to correspondence from the Next Energy Capital that we noted at our meeting on the 20th of November and forwarded to the Economy Committee. Members, if you have any comments you can tend to note. And members are referred to page 587 of the packet of correspondence dated the 19th of January from the Youth Assembly Manager, and a copy of the Big Youth Survey report, which has 1,700 responses. Youth Assembly members will debate and vote on their top issues at their plenary this Saturday, which is the 24th of January, and would welcome any members who would like to attend. I've seen you there before, John. I've attended myself. It is nice for a drop-in to meet and greet our young people and listen to their priorities. Have you any comments? Content to note? Thank you, members. I refer you to page 67 of the table papers to a copy of the Gang Masters and Labour Abuse Authority Annual Report and Accounts 24-25. Any comments? Content to note? Thank you, members. So I refer you to page 168 of table papers to correspondence dated the 20th of January from the Construction Employers Federation NI regarding this proposal for an infrastructure levy as a solution to the wastewater issues. Have you any comments? Are you content to note? Thank you, members. Agenda item 11, Forward Work Programme. I refer you to the Forward Work Programme, starting at page, it's a draft Forward Work Programme, page 172 of the table papers. Are you content that it's published? Okay, agenda item 12, any other business, members? No. Okay, agenda item 13, date, time, place of next meeting is Thursday the 29th of January, 10 o'clock, room 21, and the meeting is now adjourned.